Hello and welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. Get caught a bit off guard there. I don't know why, because I was told we were going live in 5 seconds, but anyway. Hello and welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. It's Friday. I'm joined as always by Tony Haggerty. How you doing, Tony?
I'm very well, Laura, yourself?
I'm not too bad. And in the mothership, in the kingpin seat, the podfather himself, Jim Orr. How you doing, Jim?
Yes, I'm in the mothership today. I'm actually sitting in the seat that Russell Boyce sat on. I mean, I just kind of, a dream came true. What can I say?
It's not too warm, is it? Hopefully.
It's boiling. It's actually roasting in here. I mean, Paul John Dyke, veins of ice he must have. It's like a sauna in here. But anyway, on you go.
We'll crack on and get you out of that sauna as quickly as we can, Jim. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Plenty to discuss as always after a week in Celtic. But before we do that, we're going to start with our weekly Guess the Celt. Thanks to everybody who guessed on Twitter. We had a few different guesses with the extra clue that I put in there about it being a member of the Quality Street Gang who did not perhaps live up to his potential as much as we thought he might. Some people were guessing David Kavanagh, but it was obviously George Connolly who was the main man. Tony, we were talking about before we came on that he's a little bit before your time, but more your dad's time. What did your dad have to say to you about George Connolly and what he was as a Celtic player?
Well, my dad said two things about George Connolly, or took the advice of two people on George Connolly. One was Jock Stein and one was Davy Hay, but both said the same thing, that he was Celtic's equivalent of Franz Beckenbauer. I'm certainly not going to argue with that. And the way, the 69 footage where he takes the ball off Greg and walks around the goalkeeper, as nonchalant as that to make it 3-0 and kind of win the cup for Celtic that day. These are the things that you see on the camera, and that's the kind of footage that I've relied upon when it comes to George Connolly and his goal against Leeds, side footer in the first minute, that kind of thing. But my father told me he was an exceptionally gifted footballer and an immense talent, but just as you say, never fulfilled his potential for various reasons. And but it was wonderful. I was reading about him, and he went back to Celtic Park recently, and he got a wonderful ovation, and he got a tremendous reception. And I think it just goes to show that if you do something that resonates in the hearts and minds of the Celtic supporters, you will never be forgotten. And I think George Connolly did some wonderful things in a Celtic jersey. They were maybe too infrequent. Jim will be able to help us on that because he might have watched them live. But from what I gather, he was an immense talent, and just, for whatever reasons, just never ever fulfilled that potential. But coulda, woulda, shoulda, I think, if you're referring to George Connolly. But again, my father said he was a tremendous footballer, and if you're being compared to Franz Beckenbauer in that day and age, then you must have been something special.
Absolutely, that's a pretty impressive comparison, I have to say. Having never seen either of them, but I know the story of Franz Beckenbauer, obviously, and he's kind of become a sort of synonymous with a certain type of playing role, and you only do that if you kind of define that role, so it sounds like a great comparison. Jim, as Tony said, you might have more memories of him actually as a player. And even though he didn't maybe live up to the potential that some thought he had, he certainly did more than enough. Over 100 appearances for Celtic doesn't make you a bad player in any sense. What are your memories of him as a player? Was he as gifted as everybody says he was? Of
course, aye. I mean, I think the George Connolly story is quite a sad story. I mean, you talk about not achieving his potential. He played for Celtic, he played for Scotland, he played a number of games for both of them. But the thing that got me was, I've said in the podcast before, about to be an elite sports person, but 90% of that is mental. And if you don't have it up here, then you're going to struggle. And footballers in the main are kind of ordinary people doing extraordinary jobs. And we've got no idea how difficult it must be to be able to be a football player. You're playing against other players who are trying to make it difficult to do your job. You've got guys in your team who are trying to do your job for you, get you out of the team. You've got 50,000, 60,000, in some cases 134,000 watching your every move. Phenomenal pressure to have to deal with that. And kind of sadly, from George Connolly's point of view, he couldn't deal with that. But he was immensely talented. And his future should have been a long one with Celtic. And he should have been the next Billy McNeil. Could have been the next Billy McNeil. could have, should have been the Celtic captain, could have, should have, racked up 500, 600 appearance, could have, should have possibly been Scotland's most capped player, Scotland's captain. Tony talked about the goals before we were on there, the 69 goal, the 70 goal against Leeds. He also got a penalty kick in a cup final against Rangers in 1973. So mentally, on the park, he had no issues, but off the park, he kind of struggled. And that's the bit we don't see. We really don't understand how that works. And he packed it in his mid-20s. And I think he's in his early 70s now. So if you've had to live with that for the best part of 50 years, I mean, how do you kind of deal with that? I think it's absolutely tragic in terms of what happened to George Conley. But certainly, if you played for Celtic for 150 odd games and you played for Scotland a few times, then I think you've achieved a lot. But you could have achieved, so much more. It's just such a shame, because usually Tony tells the stories of people cry. But it's such a shame, But he was a fantastic player. Yeah, I mean, to compare him to Franz Beckenbauer is not an unfair comparison. And for younger people tuning in, think of Van Dijk. Somebody like Van Dijk, he had the physicality of a Van Dijk, he had the quick feet of a Van Dijk, and he could read a game like a Van Dijk. And he should have been an all-time Celtic legend. And that's the bit about not achieving your potential. To play 150 games for Celtic and play for Scotland, I think that's doing pretty good, but you should be multiplying that by a big number. And one of the games I seen him play was the time Scotland qualified for the World Cup back in 73. And there was 6 Celtic players in that team, and he formed a really good partnership playing sweeper alongside Jim Holton. He should have went to that World Cup, but he disappeared. So again, we've got no idea, and there's obviously been other things happening this week with Celtic players. Maybe head's not in the right place. We really just don't know. And it's just such a shame for George Conley, because he was a great player, yeah.
Yeah, I think, like you say, it says everything about his ability that he played over 100 games for Celtic, was capped for Scotland, and still people think he didn't reach the potential he could have. That's, as much as anybody can achieve for a lot of players. But an interesting point that you raised there about, the mental side of the game. Kevin Banks on YouTube, and thanks for everybody on YouTube, Twitter and Facebook commenting where we are live. Kevin Banks on YouTube says, if only the support that is available to people these days was available back in George's day, the story could have been so different. His autobiography is a great read. And I think that's a that's a testament to the way in which we treat off the field issues nowadays compared to back then. Players do get the support that's required, and it's realised that it's not all a physical game. Sometimes it is a mental game, and players need that support to reach their potential.
I think also, Laura, when you think about it, it's not even just players who make it. You think about the number of players who, young boys, 18, 19-year-old, been in the system for 9, 10 years, and are let go. Now, that's shattering. I played a bit of football in my youth, was never going to be good enough to play, but I played with Blackburn guys, I thought, I'm better than them, but they actually made it. I know that I'm having a grudge or anything like that, but there's loads of players out there, who were of a decent level and didn't make it, and they must be looking at players, who weren't as good as they are and thinking, I could have made that, and given the money that's sloshing about football, and one of the other sad ones, since we're talking about sad stories, one of the really sad stories I always felt was John McCluskey, George McCluskey's younger brother. He was going to be the next big thing. He was better than George McCluskey. He was a phenomenal talent, but I think was it a blood clot he got, and he had to chuck it, and I think he kind of fell away, and addictions kind of then started to play a part. It must be shattering. I mean, mentally, how do you cope with that? Knowing that you could have been, the next big thing, to be that good. And George Collins had to live with that for the last 50 odd years. Difficult thing,
It is difficult, Tony, when you look at it in a situation like that for a failed footballer, or not. I keep saying that, but George Conley obviously wasn't a failed footballer. But looking more widely at the people that Jim's talking about, most of us don't have to have the failures that we've had in life thrust back in our faces every week on the TV. I think that must be what makes it so difficult for players nowadays who maybe don't reach the top of the game, or see a player that they played with who they perhaps think they were more naturally gifted than, scoring goals every week on the TV. It must have an effect on your mental state, surely.
The game's littered with stories like that, as Jim says. I thought Jim was going to go all Marlon Brando on us there, and he could have been a contender, that kind of thing. I'm sure he was a contender with his ability and injustice. But, it's hard. That's the hardest part of football. Jim says kids being released, having spent 10 years, you know, that's earth-shattering. You know, not to compare it, but I signed personally for Celtic at 13, and I wrote my date.
Oh,
Aye.
he sits up in his chair and fluffs the cushions here. Hold on, right. What's the story, Tony?
And I wrote my date of birth down, and I was 3 weeks too old, or 2.5 weeks too old, to play for the under-13s, because I wasn't born on August the 1st or after. I was born on July the 11th, so I should have been playing a year older. But I went for a trial, and 350 of us were there, and 3 of us get taken into a room, and I was one of them. And the guy said to me, "Wow, did they not ask your age before you?" I said, "Yeah," but nobody thought to check. And I was told, "You are 2.5, however many days that is, too old." So what do you do? You know, you have to just get on with it. Well, could have, would have, should have, I don't know what happened, but you know, as Jim says, you were good enough to get picked, but just circumstances conspire. So history's littered with real talented footballers having that disappointment, you know, that crushing disappointment. As Jim says, some can handle it and some can't. You know, guys spiral into addiction, other guys just fade away into obscurity, don't want to be reminded of it. You know, so it's hard. You know, I grew for 3 days solid, and then told my father I was going to be the new Arthur Montford or Archie McDuffie because I liked your job, and they were a big influence in where my career ended up in football journalism. I thought that looks good. You know, so these are things that you just kind of, you know, back then when you were 13 and they said to you, right, play against 14-year-olds, it was the old Saudi Arabia thing, wasn't it? The guy got 8 foot and he had beards and stuff. So it was a huge difference. So, and as I say, I only tell that story because it's kind of, not just a wee bit, but I never ever, it hurt at the time, but you have to somehow find a way of just getting up and saying, right, fine. You know, I was a young guy then, so you don't know what would have happened. You know, so I don't look back in it and get all upset about it. It was just something that happened. I was upset at the time. It happens, you move on, you know, but as Jim says. But for guys like George Conley, for that to be reminded of, you know, for 50 years, that's heartbreaking. And that's the sadness about George Conley's story, because George Conley was a good footballer. It was just off the field, as Jim said, that it couldn't square the circle with it, but on the field talent. Because I believe, Jim, did you know do keep uppies in the game and stuff to annoy people?
It was a game in '66 when he was only a kid. He came on at half time and did a keep up around the pitch and what have you. But I think that's why we have to cut the players a bit of slack sometimes, because we really don't know what's going on. One of my bugbears is when we bring players on with 20 minutes to go and they only have 20 minutes of a game, and your expectation is going to do something to change a game. If you've been training all week and you only get 20 minutes at the end of a game, you only get 3 or 4 touches, and people judge you on that. You know, I think it's very unfair. So I think you have to cut players a wee bit of slack, because there's enormous pressure, absolutely enormous pressure. Particularly for Celtic as well. When any team has a bit of pressure, because again, people try to stop you doing your job, people want your place in the team, people are watching you, people are criticising you. But yeah, we need to cut players a bit of slack sometimes, and George Conley's that example.
Yeah, I've got to say, that's one thing that I always remember. I didn't play an awful lot of organised football as a child, but like, I remember growing up a couple of times playing in a couple of 11-a-side matches, and that was the big thing that shocked me when I actually was playing in proper football matches, was how little you see of the ball, how little of a chance you've actually got to make a difference in the game. It's all right being in the back garden when it's you out in the field and your brother in goal, and you can be Ronaldo or you can be Gabriel Batistuta or whoever you want to be, because it's you taking all the shots in goal. But when you've got, you know, 22 people on the pitch, the ball can be 40-50 yards away from you, and you're expecting to try and have an impact in the game. It's a difficult thing.
I also think that's why we love football, Laura. That's why, because one moment can change a game. One game can change a season. I mean, one moment can change somebody's life. You know, you come on and, like, thinking back to the Barcelona game, after Tony Watt scored that goal, you're thinking he's just going to be meteoric. It's going to just, you know, that 1 second, you know, and that's, as I say, that's what we love about football. It changes. It can change so quickly. But hey ho.
One moment can change a game. One game can change a life. Are you Tony Haggerty in disguise there? That's some Some phraseology. I enjoyed that one.
I'm his agent. I'm his new agent. Now I'm in the mothership. I've got so much power in here. It's just Dykes is making me tea at the moment.
Well, an old
No sugar, just milk. No. Tea biscuits. Are they chocolate? Nah. Two.
In old money, I was an outside right or a right winger. There you go. Yeah.
So, Tony, if you to compare yourself to any current Celtic player, who would you be?
It's got to be wee Jamesy, hasn't it? Surely.
Probably wee Jamesy because I was quite small. I was small and tricky. That was kind of, and I was fast. That was a few stone ago to be fair before end of season. You know what I mean? So,
we're all there, aye. And of all the players you've ever seen, who are you the closest to then? Forget just the Celtic team. You pick somebody and say, that was me. If you'd have made it, who would you have been? I'd have been that player there. Who would it have been?
Oh, that's too tough, man. Because I know who I want to be.
Not who you want to be. Who would you say, that's me? If I'd have made it, that'd have been me.
Wee Georgie, the Belfast boy, surely.
Wait, wasn't that good?
I'd probably say David Provan.
Right? Good.
Wow.
Yeah, because I had a bit of skill and I could score goals and I could cross and I was no bad. I was all right. I could hold on. So without being, as you say, the George Best, I mean, you want to be Charlie Nick, you want to be... I had Charlie Nick moments now and again.
That's your new nickname. That's your new nickname, David Provan.
Ever have a Charlie Nick haircut? No.
I had a Charlie Nick haircut, very much so. I spent 3 hours in the hairdressers underneath the purple rinse hairdryer. I wrote that in the book. 50 quid it cost my dad in 1985 or something. What a doing I got at school on the Monday. Absolute doing. But it didn't bother me because I thought I looked like Charlie Nick. You know what I mean?
That's one of the ones that looks as if it was out of fashion at the time. Honestly, I can't comment, but
Oh, no, I mean, just swirling about with that with a lot of, hey, wonderful.
We're into too much information category here, Laura. You want to move on? Quick.
I'm going to pull us out of this pool of nostalgia and head and shoulders hairdos and whatever. I'm going to drop us back into the current day where there are some positives to be had. The main positive being a 3-1 victory in a sort of friendly kickabout with Sheffield Wednesday during the week. Strangely split up into 3 parts apparently, so 2 breaks and three portions of the game. Now, I didn't see the game because I was working during the week, but Tony, you said you managed to catch a glimpse of it. What was encouraging about the game that you saw, being it's that Ange's first in charge?
Quite a lot was encouraging. A lot of the younger players showed up really well. Moffat showed up really well. Shaw showed up really well. Montgomery showed up well. Sorrell played well. So there was lots to enthuse about. Shelder came on and did look really accomplished. So you sort of looked around and, there's some good players there. Again, I never read too much into results in pre-season, but what I was looking at was attitudes of players, the guys that wanted it, and the ones that I mentioned looked as if they really wanted it and wanted to impress. Even as Yeti scoring a goal, they got off to a terrible start, but once they came into it, they played some neat football and scored 3 good goals. Moffat's been the pick of the bunch, a shot in the turn in the bottom corner. And he was a wee buzz bomb, a wee live wire, and a lot of people really liked him. And, so it was good to see that. Good to see the fact that they're clearly listening to the manager, because the manager has told the young guys, youth's the way forward. So give me a decision to make with regards to yourself. So that's what I was pleased about. And the 3 half hours was a bit strange, but certainly, they played pretty well, Celtic. But again, I'm never a lover of these kind of games. But there was a tempo that you could see. There was a high press, and there was an attacking mindset to the team. And it was good to see Edward also scoring. He's got one chance and he buried it, and so. Still that mindset, and he wants to still do well and still score goals. So I was happy all round. It was a decent start, an encouraging start, I think we would say, for Ange Postecoglou, and some food for thought and something to work on. But we're not kidding ourselves. 11 days to go to the European game against Midtjylland, and we still need players. We'd be naive to suggest that we don't need players. I've seen they've been linked with Ben Davies again. That's somebody who I would love to see come to the club, because the interest was strong the first time, and I think we should pursue that one. And that's from a reliable source from Steve McGowan in the Daily Mail, so you'd have to think that there may be something happening in that. And if a player like Ben Davies would come in, then I would feel a lot more happy and secure in the knowledge that we're going about our business the right way.
Yeah, everything I'm hearing is encouraging, particularly from people about, younger players like Shaw and Moffat. Jim, I know you didn't get a chance to see the game either, but there's been a lot of talk from Ange about putting trust in the young players, and certainly, out of necessity, probably more than anything, he was forced to play some of them in that bounce game. Do you think he'll stick to his word as far as that's concerned? Do you expect to see more play from players like Robertson and Moffat and Shaw going into this season? Either because Ange is wanting to do that, or maybe he might be forced to do that?
I think I wouldn't pay much attention to the game the other day. These games don't really count for anything. I mean, once upon a time, back in the day, we'd be playing some Swedish 8th Division team in the back of Beyond, and you'd be lucky to hear the score some of these games. I think he wants as many experienced players back in as soon as possible. If the team are playing well, he'll bring in some of the youngsters, but I don't think you can throw a whole lot of youngsters in the same team together. I think he wants as many experienced guys back in as soon as possible. I think he wants to sign people as soon as possible. I mean, people were commenting on his demeanour after the game as if he was kind of hacked off about things. I think he's the only guy we've got at the moment. He's doing a number of jobs, and it must be very wearing on him. I think the sheer scale of what he's having to take on. We don't have a Doff, so he's the Doff just now. I don't know about how things are in the sports science or the scouting, whatever it is. So he must be having to take on a number of different things. And then with one off-field matter this week, he's having to deal with that as well. So I think he's maybe starting to realise just how massive this job is. And time is not on his side. But in terms of answering the question, I think he'll play youngsters when he's got a settled team. And he just wants as many experienced guys back as soon as possible to give us some sort of chance for this game in less than 2 weeks. And that's the game, I've used the phrase reality bites. I think half-time against Midtjylland, we'll get an idea of what's actually happening here. If we're getting hammered, it's a kind of, oh no, it's going to be a difficult season. If we put up a good show and we're in the game at half-time, that'll give you a bit of encouragement moving forward. I don't think he'll play a lot of young kids. Young guy Moffat apparently played well the other day. One to watch, but we want Jamesy Forrest back, or we want Mikey Johnson back. You're going to go with, I would go with them first because they've been over the course before. And we blood the youngsters if and when we get a chance to blood the youngsters. But as I said, I wouldn't pay much attention to the game the other day, nor the games to come. I think it's all about getting, as they say, minutes in the legs, to use that kind of cliche, and try and get a bit of shape, etc. But from Ange's point of view, I think he has to work out on the training field. He has to get a goalkeeper and two centre-backs. He has to be just working with these guys. He has to get that settled. Because I think we had Dan the man from Japan on the other week, and we made a comment about, he wouldn't defend Ange's defence, nor would Ange defend his defence. That's the bit we have to get right, and as soon as possible, because if we lose goals, we won't win anything. So I think that's the main thing he has to kind of focus on. Get that back three sorted out. If it's Barkey, great, and two centre halves that he's got just now, and work as hard as you possibly can with these guys on the training field and play the same guys. Because the big issue we had last year is we kept changing the goalkeeper, and we kept changing the centre backs, and we kept changing the formation of the back two or the back three, and that just led to confusion, I think, most of last season. And the manager saying he's my number one goalkeeper, and a few weeks later he's not my number one goalkeeper. And just that was a big factor last season. So we have to get that nailed down, from the off this season. So don't mess about, don't experiment. Get your goalkeeper and your back two, and that'll give us some sort of chance moving forward.
Yeah, Tony, Jim summarised quite well there just the mountain of work that's facing Ange. The title of our show today is Will Ange Postecoglou receive the backing he needs from the Celtic board? He'll need that in terms of signings, obviously, but also, there are some rumours abound on various sources that he perhaps has tried to get his own staff in and hasn't been allowed and has been forced to use the staff that's already existing at the club. We don't know exactly if that's true, but it's not boding well, is it, considering the way things went for the previous manager and what went wrong there? You know, are you setting them up for failure based on what we're seeing in terms of the lack of support so far?
Well, I think it was Ange that said himself he will make a decision on his backroom staff once he's assessed everything that's at his disposal. Now, read into that what you will, but that suggests to me that he kind of works with people that are there when he goes to a club and then brings his own men in. And I think Dominic Mackay said there would be no barrier to him bringing in his own men. So I read that article the same as you did the other day, from someone saying that he's been denied his backroom stuff, but I don't think that. I think there's a wee bit of mischief making there, and I kind of didn't dismiss it, but I kind of took it for what it was worth. To say, right, okay, only one man will make up his mind on this, and that's the manager. And in the new era of supposed transparency, we will be told. I'm sure he'll come out and say, look, I will now bring in backroom staff of my own, or I'm happy enough to work with John Kennedy and Gavin Strachan. Because as Jim's always alluded to, what do they do? We don't actually know what they do. So maybe Ange is asking the same questions as us, and then he'll formulate his opinion, and then he might go to the board and say, I want X and Y to come in. And the board, having appointed him, will have to back him. And it goes without saying they're going to have to back him with funds for players. The club needs surgery. They need, as Jim said, a settled goalkeeper and 2 centre-half. Because our Achilles heel last season was conceding goals. And we conceded bread and butter goals. There was that incredible stat halfway through the season that 43% of the goals came from set pieces against Celtic, wasn't it? Something like that, I believe. I mean, you're not going to win this, Jim. You're not going to win anything if you're conceding that percentage of goals from just ordinary bread and butter crosses coming into your box from free kicks, corners, or whatever. So that has to be addressed. And I know it's no Ange's 40 about the defence, but we have to have some kind of settled defence. But we've known that. We've known that since the clock was counting down from 120 odd days. So it's now 11 days, and we don't seem to be. My concern is we're not really any further forward than that. And it's getting to the wire, and now, with 11 days to go, the Ben Davies rumour has came back again. Vucevic, they're still supposedly in a deal with that. Starfelt, they're still talking. Why are they talking? Why are these deals not getting over the line? So that, as Jim says, you have 10 days a week to work on shape before the Michelin game and give you some sort of fighting chance. That's what should happen. Well, ideally, that's what supporters want to happen. Whether it happens or not is another thing. But this is the new manager, so the board have to back him, have to back his judgment. And if he wants these players in, then he needs these players. Go and get them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Jim, just to pick up on what Tony said there, we had Dan on from the from the Japan Times, and there was quite a bit of reaction to that podcast because of his opinion on Ange's defending or his coaching of defence or lack thereof. I have to say that the moves that I'm seeing being made so far suggest to me that it is a priority for him if he sees it as a major weakness. He's been looking at Matt Ryan, the goalkeeper. He's been looking at Vucinic, the Croatian defender. And to paraphrase David Bowie, there's a Starfelt waiting in the sky in the form of that Swedish defender coming from Rubin Kazan. So it does seem to be a priority for him, don't you think, that he does see it as a weakness and he is trying to sort it before he looks at the more attacking side of the team?
Yeah, I think so. Before answering that question, Tony said mischief making. That's what I was going to say in terms of that tweet. There's too much noise going about social media, and social media is a great thing and it's a really bad thing. So you can't react to everything that you see. We have to give the big chap a couple of months to put his own stamp on it, and then we can start shouting the ball. So if John Kennedy and Gavin Strachan are still there after 2 months, it's not going particularly well, then you can shout and ball about things happening. So I don't think people should react to tweets because they're just noise. Ange talked about usually needs time, and one of the things that Dan said, he talks about Bob the Builder, but Ange's the rebuilder, which was a bizarre phrase, and he needs a bit of time. And the thing I thought was an interesting fact was that when Dan talked about the 56 goals for, the 56 goals against, and we all had that collective sigh to say, what is this? Somebody tweeted me the following season, the league table, sorry, and in that season with the 56, they were 9th, and then his team won the league the following season. And when his team won the league, they went from 56 goals for to 68 for, and they went from 56 goals against to 38 against. So they scored about 20% more goals and they lost about 30% less goals. So if you knew nothing about this, which is us, basically, you would think he's obviously sorted out the back to have lost 30% less goals. So, I think that's a good thing moving forward. And the other thing that was dead interesting about that was that they only played 34 games. So 34 games, 68 goals for, 38 against. So it's almost 2-1, basically. And we've been hearing this kind of narrative that in an Ange team, you score 4, you score 5. When in fact, the evidence is saying you score 1, you score 2. So it's not that, high scoring football that we think it's going to be. The big man knows what he has to do. And I think with every day goes by, reality is biting on him. He's thinking, I need this to do that. And he's running out of time. And he must be getting annoyed because maybe he has been told we'll get 2 or 3 guys in before Midtjylland and it's not happened yet. And if he's not getting time to work with these guys on the training pitch, if he signs somebody 2 or 3 days before the match, that's just useless. Because they have to get here and there's all the COVID stuff that's going to happen as well. So I think maybe he is getting a bit frustrated. But let's not get on his back. My big concern is if we're all allowed back into the football, hopefully, and if we're not playing particularly, what I don't want the fans is to start to boo the team. Because that's counterproductive as well. This of all season, we have to really get behind the team. We know how we've got to where we are, but we are where we are. So let's kind of get behind them and let's try and block out the noise about somebody saying, my understanding is, oh, is it? Is that your understanding? You don't have to tell us that. Right? Or you can tell us it, but we'll ignore it anyway. And you pick what you choose that you think is relevant information. That's how you move forward with this kind of stuff. So Ange is the man. We get behind him. Fingers crossed. We make some sort of fist of the game in less than 2 weeks' time. The game on Saturday, the other friendlies that happen, they don't really matter. Don't get too wound up about them. Because the thing was, I didn't watch the game. I was going to watch the game this morning, but Mr. Dykes dragged me through here, so I didn't get a chance to watch it. I'll blame him. But I looked at Twitter. And looking at Twitter, after 15 minutes, people were having heart attacks. What's this guy doing? This guy's a clown, sack him. And then you fast forward to the end of the game, it's what a performance. This guy was brilliant, that guy's brilliant. Just ignore it. It's just getting some minutes in the legs, getting a bit of fitness up. Ange gets a chance to see what they are like on the park. He might find 1 or 2 gems, like the young guy Moffat, who apparently played really well, which is good going forward. But I don't think he'll be depending on people like Owen Moffat for the game against Midtjylland. He wants Forrest back. He wants a fit Johnson. He wants some sort of shape in there to give himself a chance because they'll be up for it. They've won the league. They'll be a good team. So we're not playing teams who are, just come back from their holidays and are unfit. These are real games. And that's my big concern that we get a bit of a doing against Midtjylland. Hopefully not, because I'm trying to be more positive this season moving forward.
Laura, there's also this narrative about this being a transitional season for Celtic. I'm not having that. I want Celtic to be as competitive as possible in every game, regardless of the personnel. Not that in the head that this is some kind of transition because Andy's building a team. No. You've got to build a team from the get-go. Make Celtic competitive. Because Celtic need to win the title to get access to 40 million quid. So that's what you have to do. As Jim says, he knows the job. So I'm not having this kind of, we're in transition. Well, fine. Great. That's just a word that's bandied about. I'm not having transition. I want a competitive Celtic team. Ange's been charged with the task to come in and make Celtic competitive to win the title. I gave him a pass for Europe because I think that's all come too quickly and too soon for him to make any real difference in that stage. But I want it right for the league and the campaign. So I'm not. The word transitional season or the words transitional season are getting scrapped from the minutes of any meeting that I'm in. Celtic team, that's what I want this season, and I'm not going to go hard on the manager because I know he's had a small amount of time to prepare. But I still want him to do his utmost make Celtic league winners again. I'm not having this. That kind of he's building something. Well, how long's that going to take?
Yeah.
I get that he's building something, but I kind of want him with the help of the board to build something rather quickly and wrestle the title back off Rangers. Go on, Jim. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, I think every manager has their honeymoon period at the start with everything, the sweetness and light, and Dom and Ange are the best of pals and all that kind of stuff. We all love Ange. But at some point, as I said, reality is going to bite. So whether that's the Midtjylland game or the Hearts game or the first trip to Ibrox, if we don't make a good start, then there's loads of pressure on the guy. But and I think that's maybe starting to dawn on him, that things maybe aren't as advanced as we'd like them to be. But again, let's try and be positive and let's kind of get behind Ange.
Yeah, some comments coming in kind of backing up a lot of what we're saying, to be honest. Joe Glenn on YouTube says, what moves? There hasn't been any, just rumour and talking, not a single signing. Says utterly pathetic as well. I'm not sure I would go that far, but I see where his frustration lies. Jerry Murphy on YouTube says, we have no idea who Ange is looking at. Only signings are relevant. It's been 3 weeks since he had said he needed players. So... yeah, no movement as far as that's concerned, only rumours at this point, and obviously until somebody's announced, as we know only too well at Celtic, we can't really rely on that for any form of hard fact that a player's coming into the club or anybody else for that matter. So that having been said, we'll look at some of the players who are at the club, some of the players who remain at the club. There are a few players who came in last season, Tony, who... didn't have great seasons in their first season with the club, and the potential for them to be on their way back out as quickly as they came in is something that a lot of fans were shouting for. You watched the game yesterday, saw Albion Ajeti captain the team and score a goal. Where do you think his future lies? Are we asking too much that there might still be a future for him at the club, or do you think is it a case of needs must? Where do your feelings lie on him, and what happens to him going forward?
It's a bit of both. I feel that there could be a goal scorer somewhere deep down lurking in a Jetty. He scored against Dundee United early in the season and dug out a win at Tannadice. With minutes to go. He scored a lovely finish when Turnbull played him in against Hibs at Celtic Park. He showed bits. He's played in bits and starts, and there's some kind of ability there. But it's again like many. He's just too inconsistent. When he was asked to lead the line, he never showed up. But he was asked to lead the line not enough times, because when he did play, it was the occasional goal you got here and there. But I think there's ability there, and maybe a case of needs must. People take time to settle. I get that. But, he has to hit the ground running. As he scored a goal the other day, but I don't really read too much like Jim says into these games. When the ball bounces for Rio, Albion Ajeti has to score if he plays. Bottom line, or else he will be deemed surplus to requirements. Another Klimala, who scored a couple of decent goals, but ultimately was shipped out for the money that we paid for him. So the same could happen to Ajeti, but my concern about Ajeti is, do you see anybody paying £5 million for Ajeti not being able to score in what you would term a relatively poor Celtic team? So who's going to pay for it? Who's going to give you your money back for that? If they decide that he's no longer required. But as I say, there's something at the back of my head telling me that Ajeti might score goals and might be worth persevering with until January, and then you make a decision.
There's a narrative there that he might be the next Teemu Pukki, because the rumour is that Norwich City are on his tail, and Teemu Pukki himself didn't make waves at Celtic but went on to score a lot of goals for Norwich City. Is it a case, do you think, of maybe the shoe doesn't fit sometimes for a player at a club?
There is that element to it. Teemu Pukki was, never really hit the heights that we wanted him at Celtic. Went to Norwich and everyone was like, where was this guy at Celtic? So sometimes players just don't get it. They're not the right fit, as you say. It doesn't happen for them. They go somewhere else and everything they touch turns to gold. I'd like to think that wasn't the case with Ajeti, but there's something saying that it could be. But as I say, it might be worth persevering for the time being because, as you say, it needs must. And giving him the chance, giving him an extended run of games to say, right, Albion, you're the main man. Let's see what you got.
Yeah, I think that's true. Jim, where do you stand on Ajeti? John Mulhern on YouTube saying seeing Ajeti on against Wednesday, he looks uncomfortable up front on his own support. Is it a case of that maybe we're trying to shoehorn him into a system that doesn't suit him, or is it just not worked out and we need to cut our losses with him?
I mean, if he's looking uncomfortable up front, maybe we should play him in goals. Maybe that'll solve two problems at once there. I think he's a player. I mean, I think it was a strange signing. You go out and spend $5.5 million on a player who hasn't kicked a ball in a year. I mean, that was a strange signing to start off with. But he showed when he came into the team, he's obviously a poacher and he scores goals. I think if you give him chances, he'll score goals. I think three things happened last year. There was loads of things happened last year. But I think three things happened with Ajeti. James Forrest got injured. So if you're going to make chances for him, James Forrest was the main guy who would make chances for him. He then gets injured. So he's out for a while and he comes back to a completely dysfunctional team. So if you add those three things together, maybe that's the reason why plus the fact he hadn't played in a year before, there's four things there. Reasons why it didn't work out for him last year. But he's shown 2 years before, and you've also got COVID, 5 reasons. But if you go back 2 years before he went to West Ham, he was knocking in goals for fun. So, and he's an international player. So there's a player there. We were talking earlier about people's mental state, and you have to be mentally up for things. Ajeti to me is one of these kind of modern players. I mean, I think he's like financially made for life. You know, a few big transfers, a few big sign-on fees. When you're like that, what's your motivation at that point? Is he that bothered about playing? You know, is he happy just to pick up his wages and then go up the road? Because in actual fact, you find, and in fact, we'll talk about George Connolly earlier, that you find that there are players who actually don't like playing. You know, they like to do the training and like all the kind of bonding goes, but find actual playing difficult. And I'm not saying that's Ajeti finds it difficult playing, but if you're getting 20 grand a week, whatever he's getting, and you've got a 3 or 4 year contract, I always question the motivation. I don't know what his motivation is. I hope he comes good, because we don't have many bodies, and he's a body that we have. And he scored the other day, and I know I've said it doesn't matter, but one of the things Jock Stein used to do back in the 60s and 70s, he would play against really, really poor teams and scored 10, 12 goals before the start of the season to get the confidence up. So Ajeti scored a goal. That's good. I think you'll have to play him against Midtjylland, because there'll be no one, the potential there'll be no one else at all. So again, hopefully he comes good. People said he looked a lot fitter than he was last season. He couldn't have been any unfitter than he was last season. So that all goes well. And I think like any striker, if he gets off to a good start, if he bangs a couple of goals against Midtjylland, then we're off and running. If he doesn't, then that's a different thing. And also maybe he might suit playing up front with a big target man. Maybe that's something to think about, because what we did a lot of last year, I mean, we sat in this studio back in the transfer window at the start of last season, and I mentioned I thought we could do with a bit of physicality. I wasn't saying we should go for Dykes, but somebody like Dykes, because a lot of the times when Celtic play football, they try and play around teams or through teams, and when that doesn't work, there's nothing. And having the option of throwing a high ball into a big guy up front, and if Ajeti's a kind of poacher playing alongside him, maybe that's an option. But then again, I'm not too sure what kind of Ange's teams are, because people talk about plays with 2 wingers and 1 guy up front. So, and I'm sure that's all the things Ange's having to think about. You know, how can he actually get the best out of the players that he's got? And if Ajeti's a poacher and maybe not good at leading the line, does that mean he gets in Ange's team to start off with? So that's a factor. Never mind how fit or how well Ajeti's actually playing. So I think Ange's got a lot of things to think about. But if he's fitter this year, great. If he gets off to a good start, great. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think only time will tell, as we so often say, and hopefully, you know, for his sake as well as Celtic's, if we can keep him and can be a success, it'll only do is good going forward. And before we close out the show today, we just wanted to draw your attention to, I don't know if we'll have crossed the barrier during the show, but we're certainly close to 12,600 subscribers on YouTube. So if you're watching and you haven't subscribed, give that wee subscribe button on the channel a press. It's free, and what will happen is you'll just get notifications whenever the channel goes live, or whenever a new video goes up, and you're able to join us live on the show. In order for you to subscribe, another thing you can do is retweet a Celtic State of Mind ACSOM Pod tweet on Twitter for the ACSOM prize draw. We are offering anybody who subscribes and retweets that tweet quite an amazing prize, a BPI CD presentation awarded to EMI Music Publishing in 1997 to recognise sales of more than 2.1 million copies of the Verve's Urban Hymns, which is an ironic thing to be given away on a Celtic Channel podcast, considering Bittersweet Symphony pretty much describes what it is to be a Celtic supporter at times. But get subscribed, get that retweeted, and you could be in with a chance of winning what is, I'm sure, a very tempting and amazing prize for any music lovers out there. Unfortunately, there's not a Westlife one on offer, but time may help us. Time may help us if you're listening, Paul.
Thinks he's on the case. He's on the case, he tells me. Yeah.
I'm glad you picked Bittersweet Symphony, Laura, not The Drugs Don't Work. All right?
Well...
Yeah.
Well, no comment on that, no comment. We shall move on swiftly. As Jim says, we move on. Jim, I'll come to you first on this one. Again, looking at players that we have still in the squad, James Forrest is coming back after a lengthy injury last season where we didn't really see him, but he did obviously make a lot of impact when he was starting to come back into the squad. Callum McGregor looked like a different player at the Euros under a manager who was actually coaching him properly in Steve Clarke. What impact do you think those two can have this season? James Forrest obviously coming back, hopefully to full fitness, and Callum McGregor potentially being managed with a bit more direction and a bit more input than he was for the previous 18 months or so?
I think they'll be huge, Laura, absolutely huge. The experience that they've got, even over the course and distance, they're the guys that are going to have to bring the new guys up to speed in terms of what it means to play for Celtic and having to win week in, week out. I think we've all known that Callum McGregor's played a ridiculous amount of football, and that was him playing over the summer again. So I think the boy needs a rest, and hopefully we have enough good midfield players this season that we can give him a rest during the season. And I think Forrest was maybe in the same boat, but obviously having been out for the best part of the season, he should be fresh this season. But we need to have... The thing that was poor last season was the kind of squad management. The fact we went to the well with the same players time and time again, and whether that's because the management had no confidence in other players, who knows? But we have to be better at that, and we have to have someone who can slot in for Callum. I certainly make him. I mean, it's an obvious choice to be captain. I can't think of anyone else who could be captain. But he does need a rest, and we've got a game in whatever it is, 11 days' time. And he said a week off or 2 weeks off, and he's back into it again. Again, I talked at the top of the podcast about the mental side of things, having to push yourself, and the physical side from Callum's point of view as well, having to push your body time and time again without kind of rest. So I think we have to manage him well this season. With James being out last season, he should be good to go. My big concern has been the major thing from last year was the impact of COVID. COVID hasn't went away. And in fact, COVID is now actually affecting younger players. So I think we're going to have another stop-start season with us, and that could be a huge factor. And one of the things I would like Dom to make sure that there's consistency within the SFA of COVID and how we deal with COVID and the COVID testing, etc. That all the clubs are sending their test to the same place. There's no inconsistencies there. And if people, fall foul of COVID, that the SFA deal with that, and they deal with that on a consistent basis. Not looking for any favours here, but just so we all know that it's transparent and it's accountable and all that stuff as well. So we'll need a wee bit of luck next year with the COVID, because, we deserved not to win the league last year. The team that won it thoroughly deserved it. But we didn't have to get hit by COVID. I know JP mentioned this a few times, but we did. I think a wee bit more than other teams. And it was key players. It wasn't like, players that were kind of on the bench. It was Eddie and Christie and these kind of guys, that we lost, obviously, 16 players, whatever it was at the same time. So we need a wee bit of luck next year in terms of the COVID as well. But to get back to the question you answered, Callum and James Forrest, they are the most experienced players at the club. I think we'll have to rely very heavily on them, but hopefully we can manage Callum a little bit better than we've done in the past, because the boy needs a rest.
Tony, before I come on to ask you, Stephen Hutchison in the YouTube comments, the man after my own heart, he says, if it wasn't for the COVIDs, where would we be? We'd be in the hospital or infirmary. Obviously, paraphrasing the famous Billy Connolly song, if it wasn't for your wellies. If only Welly's kept us from the COVID, but anyway, we move on. Yeah, looking at James Forrest and Callum McGregor, Tony, they are obviously big parts of the squad moving forward. Stephen Welsh is another one. This has really got to be his true breakthrough season to really cement his place in the team, wouldn't you say? Like, I think he certainly made a good enough impression last season. A bit of inexperience, some mistakes that you would expect from a guy who's not got very much first team experience, but surely this is going to be a season for him to cement his place in the Celtic team for the next decade, the way those two have already.
You would like to think so, yeah. I mean, there's been enough in Stephen Welsh to know there's the nub of a player there, you know. But again, I wouldn't like to be relying solely on him as that guy at the back of the pack. I would want him alongside, Julian when he's fully fit and recover. You want him alongside experience, so experience can talk him through it, and iron out these mistakes that you alluded to there. But again, with young players, I always say it: you need to let them breathe, and you need to let them gain that first team experience. You can't be keeping too much pressure on them per se, but the fact of the matter is, if they're going to play, they're in pressure situations, so they have to turn up. They can't switch off. As a footballer, you want to play at Ibrox, in a game that means so much. That's what you crave. You want to play in cup finals. You want to play in Europe. If you're given that platform, then you've got to perform. And I know, and it might seem that I'm saying the opposite of what I'm saying, but that is the pressure that you're under to perform when you're put in the starting 11 for those games. But what you don't need is anybody saying to you, right, that you can't make a backside of it type thing. You just got to let them breathe and play. But with inexperience comes mistakes. With youngsters, mistakes come, but you're hoping to pair them up with experience that if they do make mistakes, somebody will be there to cover for them. And I like Welsh. I think he's a tidy footballer. Like you, I think this is it. This is the season he has to really cement his place as a Celtic, first team player and an automatic starter. And I think the experience of last season will do him really good because they get criticised and he dealt with a lot of flack, but he was one of the silver linings in the clouds of last season. So it's now time for him to grasp the mantle and take it a stage further and become the player we all hope that he can be.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I think, McGregor and Forrest have been mainstays of the team over the last decade, perhaps longer. I think Welsh can be another, one of our own who makes that transition this season, hopefully, and is at the heart of the defence going into the next decade, because certainly we need it. If anybody caught the picture of Johan Mjalby on Instagram the other day, he still looks in decent, fair enough nick that he could probably come in and do a job for us if he absolutely needed to, but we live in hope. To finish out the show though, I just wanted to get your thoughts, Jim. I'll come to you on this first. You're a big Scotland fan and have travelled to see them at major tournaments. Obviously they had a part to play in Euro 2020, but as we come to the final, England versus Italy at the end of the tournament on Sunday, what have been your thoughts on the tournament, the quality of the football that you've seen, and what do you see the outcome being on Sunday?
I think it's been good. I didn't watch many of the group games until we get the point at Wembley, which meant that various permutations meant that if we get 4 points, then this would happen and that. And I started watching the games then because it became quite exciting. I've watched all the games since then. I've watched all the knockout games. I think the standards have been very, very high. I mentioned last week, the week before, I think we are miles off it. Miles off it. I think we compare ourselves to smaller nations like the Austrias and Switzerlands of this world. I think we are miles off it technically, tactically. I think these are countries that have obviously invested in football and we haven't. Our facilities are hopeless. Speak to anyone who's involved in grassroots football, they'll tell you stories till the cows come home about a lack of investment, pitches lying empty, £70 to hire a pitch for half an hour for kids and stuff like that. We really, really need to sort things out in this country. I know that's not the question you asked there, but I'm off on one of my usual tangents. In terms of Sunday, I think Italy have been great to watch. Italy-Spain game was a phenomenal game. That's one of the best games I've seen in years. Brilliant. The Spain-Croatia game was just dead exciting with the amount of goals that were in it. I think England have been just very unlike England teams in the past. They're playing a bit like Germany usually play. They're just dead solid, don't do it in daft, pick off the goals when they come. They got a wee bit of luck the other night. Italy are good to watch. I don't think there's much in it come Sunday. I've got a sneaky feeling England will win it. And if they do, then ho-hum. Because I don't actually see England. I mean, I think when I was younger, I looked upon a kind of England-Scotland thing was a huge thing. It was a huge rivalry thing. I don't look upon that now because I think we're miles away now. You know, I think up to maybe the late 80s, we were more than a match for England. And once upon a time, England-Scotland was like the biggest match in the world. And in the World Cup, maybe early 60s, people started paying attention to the World Cup. The Euros didn't really kick into the 80s. So once upon a time, Scotland more than matched England. I think we're miles away from them now, and that's why everyone was going daft about getting nothing to draw at Wembley. You know, if you did that in the 70s, people would be saying, "What? Nothing each against England. You should be hammering." But to answer the question, I think it will be a tight game on Sunday, and I've got a wee sneaky feeling England will just sneak it.
Tony, Jim raises a good point there about, you know, the quality of the football in some of the matches that Italy-Spain won. I remember Denmark's performance against Russia at the end of the group stage was great. There have been plenty of exciting moments in matches, and, you know, I think it's a tournament that will go down in history as a memorable one for so many reasons. I've got to say, having watched Celtic more than any other football that I watched this season and then watching that, it's like watching two different sports to me. I can't really believe what I'm watching, and yeah, it's just been an enjoyable thing to take your mind off some of the wider issues that are going on in the world at the moment, hasn't it?
I think if you're going to compare the Celtic games to like Italy-Spain the other night, then it's different gravy, really, isn't it? I mean, that was a wonderful exhibition of football, never mind a game of football, it was an exhibition of football. The class players turned up, you know, and showed you why they're class footballers, which is why it was such an enjoyable game of football. And most of the time, you never want a game to go to extra time. You're actually praying there was another half an hour of that game the other night. You were saying, go to extra time, so you were enjoying it so much. So that gives you the measure of that. I agree with him in the sense that Scotland are miles off it. Technically, I would say, tactically, I'd maybe dispute that. But what we do have now is we've got a team that's capable of maybe qualifying for regular major tournaments because we have 5 or 6 players that are playing at a high level. And if they turn up and perform, then we've got a fighting chance in most internationals now, which is all really a Scottish national team can hope for. Have a fighting chance in every game that they play, be able to compete and claim a scalp every now and again. I mean, I think that's the best that Scotland can hope for at this minute. And I think we're getting there. We have the nub of a team. You know, we get a decent result against England with a wonderful performance, but we just didn't have it in us to take it that next step and win it 1-0. So that's the next step because that's the result that would have got us through, or maybe got us through. So in a tournament where the third best team qualified as well, Scotland found a way not to qualify. You know, so you have to accept that we are where we are internationally at the minute, but we are getting better. There's cause for optimism, and I think they can improve. As for the general standard of the tournament, I've really enjoyed it. I thought it's been terrific. There's been some wonderful matches. Spain, Croatia, game, as Jim says, goals and excitement, and then the France-Switzerland game for the same reason, goals and excitement. And that's what I want Scotland to do. I want Scotland to be like Switzerland, Ukraine, Sweden. You know, they seem to get to the next stages of these competitions, but by not being utterly brilliant. Tony,
when I say we're miles off it, when I watch some of the games when Switzerland played against one of the bigger nations, they went for it.
Yeah,
they weren't hanging back, you know. And I don't see that with Scotland. And I don't actually share your optimism here. I don't see Scotland qualifying for the next 2 or 3 because I think we're so far off it. You talked about maybe taking a scalp. We haven't taken a scalp for a long, long time.
That's what I'm saying to work towards that. I'm saying the fact is we got there, so we now have to learn how to cope and play tournament football. We get a lesson in football against Croatia. Well, Croatia kept the ball. It's a basic thing in football, keeping the ball. My goodness, they showed you how to keep the ball, and that was supposed to be an aging team. That was men against boys. So I'm projecting 2 years in the future, or a year in the future. These guys have to learn how to cope with tournament football because they're playing at the highest level for their clubs, most of that team. So if they can perform for their clubs at that level, then they have to be able to transfer that onto the international stage. And that's what I'm saying. We should be able to claim a scalp. How can Switzerland go 3-1 down against France and beat them in penalties? Scotland go 3-1 down against France and they're getting hammered 5-1.
Correct. Yeah,
right?
Correct.
So you watch that and you learn and you say, okay, this is what we do. We need to grow into tournament football again. But I think we've got the nucleus or the nub of a team that can qualify for tournaments. We now need to. I'm fed up getting to major tournaments and being the first home. And until we break that cycle, we'll just continue. So we have to start learning.
Yeah, I'm just not so sure we have a team to qualify. I thought we get in the back door, but 2 games and penalty kicks and something called the Nations League. That's how we got there, and then we get pumped out straight away. So that to me is exactly where we are, and it was great. I mean, I got the nation going, and everyone was excited, and it's the first time, and young people were engaged in the game. That was all brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. But when you pour down to the basic facts, there, we get put out. We weren't good enough. And when I talked about Austrians and Switzerland, every one of their players looked comfortable on the ball. We need every one of our players to be comfortable on the ball, and they don't. We've got, I think, 4 or 5 good, very good, excellent players, and then the rest of them are kind of workmanlike guys, and that will never cut it. And that's why teams like Austria, I mean, we is it Denmark and Austria are in another group?
Yeah, well, next 2, yeah.
We're well, I'm trying to be optimistic, but we're not going out of that group. We're not qualifying for Qatar. Whether you want to go to Qatar is a different thing. But Denmark and Austria in the same group, really tough, really, really tough.
I'm not disputing anything that you're saying. I'm just saying we have to learn lessons from this and make ourselves better and be able to cope.
Yeah.
Well,
and aspire to be like them. I'm not disagreeing with anything you're saying.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'll worry about Scotland another time because for the next 48 hours, I am an Italian. I will be supporting the Italian team, not just because it's Italy, but I think they've produced some of the best football at the tournament. They've been fun to watch. They've kind of cast aside this Italian stereotype of them. They do love defending. They do celebrate when they defend well, but they've got some fantastic attacking talent there, like Chiesa, Insigne, Immobile, Barella. All names that if you didn't know them before, you certainly do now, and I think it's going to be an exciting match, whatever happens. But thank you very much, everybody, for watching. That's all we have time for today. That was your ACSOM Friday crew with Tony, Jim, and myself. We will see you again very, very soon.
Cheers, Laura.